No ship appeared on the scanners. No hyperspace signature registered. Yet something fell from the void between stars, leaving only questions and the echo of impossible technology in its wake. The Clone Wars raged across 1,000 systems. But on the outer rim world of Deveron's forgotten sister moon, a rust-colored rock called Ashkara, orbiting far from any major hyperlane, the war was a distant rumor. It was here, in the dust and static of a world nobody bothered to garrison, that the Terrace, hope tore through the sky in a shriek of overheating metal and failing warp coils. Third person, and the scope would need to be wide. This was never going to be one crew's story alone. Captain Elena Marsh gripped the arms of her command chair as the ship bucked and screamed around her. Outside the viewport, what should have been the familiar, star-flecked black of interstellar space had become something else entirely, a smear of impossible colors, gravitational lensing that made her stomach lurch. And then, without warning, a planet where no planet should have been. Report, she shouted over the klaxons. Warp field destabilized on entry into the anomaly. Her engineer, Dae-Young Park, called back, hands flying across a console never designed for this kind of stress. I don't know what that thing was, Captain, but it wasn't in any of Zephram's projections. We're venting plasma from the port nacelle. Brace for. The Terra's hope hit atmosphere like a thrown stone skipping across a pond. And then it hit ground. When Elena opened her eyes, alarms had given way to a ringing silence, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and Park's ragged breathing beside her. The bridge lights had dropped to emergency red. Through the cracked viewport, she saw an alien sky, 2 suns bleeding, orange light across a horizon of black, rock and skeletal, wind-carved spires. Everyone still breathing? She asked. A chorus of shaky affirmatives answered her. 6 souls, all that remained of the 14 who'd left Earth orbit 8 months ago on humanity's most ambitious experiment yet, proving that warp travel, gifted to them in whispers and careful non-interference by their Vulcan neighbors, belonged to humans too. Not charity, not tutelage. Proof. Elena had grown up hearing about first contact, the way her grandparents told it, the ship that landed in Montana, the pointed-eared visitors who spoke of a wider galaxy but refused to hand humanity its keys. You must earn your place among the stars, the Vulcans had said, and then, true to their philosophy of cautious restraint, they had largely stepped back. No alliance, no federation, not yet, just the occasional advisor, the occasional word of guidance, and otherwise, silence. And the stars left for humanity to reach on its own terms, which was how 6 humans in a jury-rigged warp vessel, 40 years before anyone would christen a ship Enterprise, found themselves stranded on a world with 2 suns and technology none of their sensors could classify. Captain, Park's voice had gone tight. I'm reading structures. Artificial. About 4 clicks east. Elena straightened. Populated. Ah, yes. And Captain, whatever's out there, it's not us. Energy signatures unlike anything in the Vulcan database. Unlike anything human. There's something else too, biological readings that don't make sense. Some kind of field, permeating everything. I don't have a word for it. She would learn the words soon enough. The Force. But not yet. Elena made her decision the way she'd been trained to, not with Starfleet doctrine. Because there was no Starfleet, only the quiet Vulcan principle drilled into every human who trained under their tutors. Logic before fear, patience before violence, understanding before judgment. Damage report first. Then we go out, and we go out talking, not shooting. It took 6 hours to stabilize the Terra's Hope's reactor core and confirm what Elena already suspected. They weren't getting home. Not soon. Maybe not ever. The warp coils were slagged. The navigational data scrambled beyond recovery. And whatever anomaly had thrown them here had left no return address. She gathered her remaining crew. Park. Security Officer Marcus Webb. Xenolinguist Dr. Amara Osei. Medical Officer Chen Li. And Young Systems Specialist Rena Alvarez. In the cramped mess hall that had survived the crash mostly intact. We don't know where we are, Elena said, laying it out plainly, the way Vulcan logic demanded. We don't know who's out there. What we do know is that 4 clicks east, something built those structures Park picked up. That means intelligence. That means we have a chance to make contact. The right way, this time. No weapons drawn unless we're fired on first. Webb, ex-military and instinctively suspicious, folded his arms. And if they don't want to talk? Then we adapt, Elena said. We always adapt. That's what got us this far. Outside, the twin suns of this unknown world climbed higher, casting long shadows across the black rock. Somewhere in those distant structures, sensors far more sophisticated than Earth's had already detected the crash, the strange energy signature, the technology unlike anything cataloged by the Trade Federation, the Jedi Order, or the countless scholars of Coruscant's archives. The galaxy far, far away had just gained 6 uninvited guests. And in a war-torn era where every anomaly was a potential weapon, every unknown ship a potential threat, humanity's first steps into the stars, decades ahead of schedule, and with no Federation banner to shield them, were about to become far more complicated than Elena Marsh could have imagined. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The wind on Ashkara carried grit and static, and somewhere in the dust, something was already watching. The 4 clicks east took longer than expected. Ashkara's terrain was a maze of wind-carved rock formations, black glass canyons formed by some ancient volcanic violence, and dust that clung to boots and equipment alike. Elena led the way with Webb at her flank, his sidearm holstered but his hand never far from it. Osei walked close behind, already murmuring notes into a recorder, cataloging rock formations, atmospheric composition, anything that might help them understand where and when they'd landed. It was Alvarez who spotted the first sign of civilization, a Durasteel marker, half buried in drift sand, etched with characters in no alphabet Earth had ever produced. "Captain," she said, crouching beside it. "This isn't natural. Someone put this here." Osei knelt beside her, running gloved fingers over the strange glyphs. "Not random. This is language, syntax, repetition, deliberate structure. I count at least 3 distinct symbol clusters. This could be." She trailed off, working through the implications. "A boundary marker. A warning, maybe." "Vulcans didn't teach us a word for what we're looking at," Elena said quietly. They didn't have to wait long to find out. The structures Park had detected turned out to be a weathered outpost, half trading post, half fortress, hunkered into a canyon, wall with landing pads for small craft, and a scattering of figures moving between them. Elena's breath caught. Not human. Rodian, though she had no name for the species yet, green-skinned, large dark eyes, moving with an alien economy of motion. Beside them, a hulking Trandoshan hauled cargo crates twice Webb's size without visible strain. Sentient, Osei breathed. Multiple species, working together, or at least tolerating each other. Webb's hand drifted to his weapon. "Captain, stand down," Elena said, though her own pulse hammered. "We came here to talk." They were spotted within minutes. A trio of armed figures, 2 humanoid, 1 clearly not, converged on their position with weapons. Elena's tactical training couldn't categorize. Sleek, angular, humming with an energy signature that made her back teeth ache. "That's it," Webb muttered. "Those are guns. I don't care what universe we're in, that's a gun pointed at us." "Hold," Elena said, raising empty hands. Palms out, a gesture she hoped translated across whatever species divide separated them. "We mean no harm. We're lost. Stranded." The lead figure, human, or close enough to pass, weathered and scarred, wearing a patchwork of armor plating that spoke of a life spent surviving rather than following any uniform code, studied them with narrowed eyes. His weapon, some kind of rifle that pulsed with contained energy, didn't waver. "Lost," he repeated, testing the word like it tasted wrong. His accent was strange, but the language, basic, Elena would learn it was called, was somehow, impossibly, close enough to English that Osei's linguistic training could parse it in real time, adjusting syntax on the fly. Nobody just shows up on Ashkara unless they're running from somebody. Republic, separatists, bounty hunters. Which is it? "None of those," Elena said. "We don't know what those words mean. My name is Elena Marsh. We're explorers. Our ship malfunctioned and brought us here by accident. We're not looking for a fight." The scarred man's eyes flicked past her too. The smoking wreckage of the Terra's Hope, visible in the distance, its hull unlike anything he'd apparently seen before. Something shifted in his expression, suspicion giving way to calculation. Carson Vry, he finally said. This is my outpost. You're on HUD-adjacent territory, whether you meant to land here or not. And that means you're either valuable or you're a liability. Nothing in between. He gestured with his rifle toward the outpost. Come on, then. Let's see which one you are before somebody with worse manners than me finds you first. It was, Elena reflected as they were escorted inside. Exactly the kind of first contact the Vulcans had never trained her for. No formal diplomatic exchange. No structured protocol. Just a survivor sizing up strangers in a lawless corner of a war-torn galaxy, deciding in real time whether they were worth the risk of an alliance. Inside the outpost's cramped, common room, lit by humming energy, lamps and crowded with beings of a dozen. Species Elena couldn't begin to name. Vry poured something amber and pungent into a chipped cup and slid it across the table without offering one to his guests. Here's what I know, he said. You're not Republic. Your tech's too primitive, no offense, but also nothing I recognize. Which means you're not from any world I've heard of, and I've heard of most of them. That makes you either the most interesting thing to land on this rock in a decade, or the most dangerous. We're not dangerous, Elena said carefully. We're trying to understand where we are. What galaxy this is. What's happening here? Vry studied her for a long moment, then barked a short, humorless laugh. You don't know about the war. What war? The one that's been eating half the galaxy alive for 2 years. Republic versus Separatists. Jedi generals leading clone armies against droid. Legions built by men who used to sit in the Senate with the people there now. Trying to kill. He leaned back, gesturing broadly with his cup. Everybody picks a side eventually, or everybody gets crushed pretending they didn't have to. Elena exchanged a glance with Osei, who was already recording every word, every syllable, building the framework of a language and a political landscape neither of them could have imagined an hour ago. We didn't come here to fight anyone's war, Elena said. Vry's smile was thin, knowing, edged with something like pity. Sweetheart, nobody does. Welcome to the galaxy. Outside, unnoticed by anyone in the outpost, a small automated probe, sleek, silver, utterly silent, hovered at the edge of sensor range, recording everything, the strange ship, the 6 unknown life forms, the language nobody in its extensive databanks could immediately identify. It transmitted its findings in an encrypted burst toward a listening post 3 systems away, one loyal not to the Republic and not to the Separatists, but to a power that answered to neither. Count Dooku would want to know about this. Carson Vry's outpost, Elena learned over the following 2 days, was less a settlement and more a controlled anarchy, a way station for smugglers, threading contraband past Republic customs and Separatist blockades alike, populated by beings who'd learned that survival in the Outer Rim meant answering to no flag at all. It should have terrified her. Instead, she found something almost familiar in it. People making their own rules in a universe too big and too indifferent to offer them any others. You're taking this well, Vry observed on the second morning, watching Elena help park. Jury-rig a translator interface using components scavenged from the terrace. Hope's damaged systems. Most stranded travelers I've met spend the first week either crying or shooting at shadows. We're not most travelers, Elena said, not looking up from her work. We come from a world that spent most of its history being told to wait its turn before it could join the wider conversation. You learn patience when patience is all you're given. Vry's eyebrows rose. Somebody held you back? Not held back, Elena corrected, choosing her words with the same careful precision her Vulcan instructors had drilled into her. Guided, cautiously. There's a difference, even if it didn't always feel that way. She thought of Tvel, the Vulcan liaison who'd spent 3 years teaching her people patience, logic, the value of understanding before acting, and then had stepped back, trusting humanity to walk the rest of the path alone. We're used to earning things the hard way. Good, Vry said, because word's already spreading that something strange crashed on Ashkara, and strange things attract attention. I've had 2 separate parties reach out in the last 12 hours asking questions. One's Trade Federation adjacent, sniffing around for salvage rights, or tech to sell. The other's worse. Worse how? Vrai's expression darkened. Dooku's people. Separatist intelligence. They don't care about salvage. They care about what your ship is, where the technology came from, whether it can be replicated, whether it's a weapon. He set down the crate he'd been hauling and looked at her directly. You need to understand something about this galaxy, Captain Marsh. Nobody stays neutral for long. The war finds you, one way or another. Elena felt the weight of that settle over her. The same calculation she imagined her ancestors had faced staring up at a Vulcan ship for the first time, except this time, there was no benevolent watcher offering guidance from a position of overwhelming strength. Just choices, made in ignorance, with consequences she couldn't yet measure. It was Chun-Li who found her that evening, standing at the edge of the canyon overlook, watching Ashkara's twin suns bleed orange and violet across the horizon. Rena's translator matrix is coming together, Chin said, settling beside her. Give it another day and we'll have functional basic. Osei says the language has some kind of embedded formality structure, different registers depending on species and status. It's going to take time to get it right. Time's the one thing we don't have much of. Apparently. Elena exhaled slowly. Vry says people are already asking about us. Two factions, at war with each other. Both curious about a ship that shouldn't exist. What do you want to do? It was the question Elena had been turning over since the crash, examining it from every angle her training allowed. I want to understand the shape of this conflict before we choose anything. Vry called it Republic against Separatists, but underneath that, there's something else going on. He mentioned a Sith Lord's name like it was a curse. Jedi generals. This isn't a simple war between two governments. There's something older here. Something that runs deeper than politics. The energy field, Chen said. The one Park sensors can't classify. The Force, Elena said. Testing the word Vry had used almost reverently, almost fearfully. Whatever it is, it seems to touch everything here. Religion, war, politics. All tangled together in ways we don't understand yet. Chen was quiet for a moment. You know what this reminds me of? First contact. Except we're the ones who don't know what we're doing. And there's no wiser species standing behind us this time, ready to catch us if we fall. No, Elena agreed. This time, we're the ones who have to be wise enough on our own. That night, the outpost's makeshift sensor array picked up an inbound signature. Not the crude ion trail of a Republic patrol craft, nor the mechanical precision of a Separatist scout, but something sleeker, quieter, moving with the confidence of someone who didn't fear detection. Vry burst into the common room where Elena's crew had gathered, his face tight with tension. We've got a visitor. Small ship, unregistered transponder, coming in fast and quiet. That's not scavengers. That's someone who already knows exactly what they're looking for. Webb was on his feet immediately, hand on his sidearm. Defensive positions? No, Elena said, though her pulse hammered against her ribs. She thought of every lesson in restraint, every hour spent learning. That first contact wasn't won through strength, but through the courage to remain open even when instinct screamed otherwise. We stand our ground. We don't hide, and we don't attack first. Whoever this is, they'll learn who we are by how we choose to meet them, not by how afraid we are to be seen. Outside, the unknown ship descended through Ashkara's thin atmosphere. Running lights dimmed, landing with a precision that spoke of considerable skill. The boarding ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and a lone figure stepped out into the canyon's long shadows, robed, hooded, moving with an unnatural stillness that made every hair on the back of Elena's neck rise, though she couldn't have said why. Osei's hurried translation matrix caught the words as the figure spoke, low and measured, addressing no one and everyone at once. I felt your arrival 3 systems away, the figure said, lowering their hood to reveal sharp, calculating eyes and features weathered by decades of war and worse. Something about you disturbs the Force in ways I haven't sensed before. I've come a long way to understand why. Count Dooku had come to Ashkara himself. For a long moment, no one on the canyon floor moved. Elena's crew stood frozen in the outpost's floodlit clearing. And even Vry, a man who'd clearly seen his share of dangerous visitors, had gone very still, his weapon lowered rather than raised, as though instinct told him a fight here would be suicide rather than defense. Count Dooku. Vry said under his breath, more confirmation than greeting. Of all the people to show interest in a crashed ship, Elena stepped forward before Webb could, keenly aware that whatever this being was, he radiated an authority that had nothing to do with weapons and everything to do with something deeper, something that pressed against her senses, like static electricity before a storm. She thought of the word Vry had used, the Force. She was standing in front of someone who wielded it. I don't know who you are, she said, choosing honesty because she had nothing else to offer. But I understand you've come a long way, and I'd like to understand why. Dooku's sharp eyes studied her with unhurried interest, the way a scientist might study an unexpected variable in a familiar equation. You truly don't know, he said, and there was something almost like surprise in his voice. That is rare. Most beings who cross my path already understand the stakes of this war, one way or another. You genuinely do not. We're not from this galaxy, Elena said. Our ship malfunctioned. We ended up here by accident, and we have no interest in your war. Everyone believes that, in the beginning. Dooku moved closer, his robes whispering against the canyon dust, and Elena forced herself not to retreat. The Force does not simply disturb around beings who are irrelevant to its currents. Captain, and you are a captain, are you not? I can sense the weight of command on you, even without knowing your species, your world, or your ship's capabilities. Tell me, what is it you seek here, if not a side in this conflict? Understanding, Elena said simply. A way home, eventually, if one exists. In the meantime, survival, and the chance to learn about the galaxy we've found ourselves in without being forced into a war we didn't choose. Something in Dooku's expression shifted, not quite approval, but a recalibration, the look of a chess player, reassessing an opponent's opening move. An admirable goal, and an impossible one, I'm afraid. Neutrality is a luxury this galaxy no longer affords anyone with. Something worth taking. His gaze flicked toward the smoking wreck of the Terra's Hope, visible in the distance. Your technology, crude by galactic standards, and yet unlike anything cataloged in Republic or Separatist databases. That alone makes you valuable to parties far less patient than myself. Webb's hand tightened on his weapon. Is that a threat? It is an observation, Dooku said, without so much as glancing at him, his attention remaining fixed on Elena with unsettling precision. I did not come here to threaten you, Captain. I came because I wished to see for myself what had disturbed the Force so profoundly that I felt it from my flagship 3 systems distant. And because, he paused, weighing his next words with evident care, I am occasionally in need of allies who are not already committed to the Republic's particular brand of corruption. Elena felt the shape of the offer before he'd fully made it. And something in her, trained by years of Vulcan philosophy, tempered by the knowledge of how carefully her own people had been guided toward maturity, recognized the danger of accepting power freely offered by someone who clearly expected something significant in return. You're offering an alliance, she said. I am offering an opportunity, Dooku corrected. The Republic you will inevitably encounter is a bureaucracy rotted through with corruption, propped up by a Senate more concerned with profit than principle, defended by an army of clones bred for obedience rather than conviction. I offer something different, independence from a broken system, and the resources to protect yourselves and your people rather than becoming pawns of it. And what would you want in return? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the shape of the answer. Your technology, Dooku said, with the directness of a man who saw no reason to disguise his interests. Whatever principle allows your vessel to traverse distances that should be impossible without a hyperdrive. Shared, studied, understood. In exchange, my protection and my patronage, extended to you and your people for as long as you require it. Behind Elena, she heard Park shift uneasily, Osei's breath catch. It would have been so simple, accept the offer. Secure protection in an incomprehensible galaxy. Let a powerful stranger absorb all the danger their arrival had summoned. But Elena thought of Vry's warning. Nobody stays neutral for long. And she thought, too, of the deeper lesson embedded in every hour of Vulcan instruction sheet, absorbed since childhood. That power offered without understanding was a debt that compounded, and that some alliances cost more than any war. I appreciate the honesty of your offer, Elena said carefully, but I can't accept it. Not because I doubt your sincerity, but because I don't yet understand this war well enough to know what side of it I'd truly be choosing, or what it would cost the people, counting on me to choose wisely. For a moment, something flickered across Dooku's face, not quite anger, but the cold recalculation of a man unaccustomed to refusal. A dangerous position, Captain. Neutrality in a galaxy at war rarely remains a choice for long. Sooner or later, someone will make the decision for you. Then I'll face that when it comes, Elena said. But I won't hand over the one advantage we have left out of fear of what might happen if I don't. Dooku studied her for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, something like respect crossed his weathered features. Very well. I will not force the issue today. But mark my words, Captain Marsh, the Republic will not extend you the same courtesy of choice that I have. When the Jedi come, and they will come, you may find my offer remembered fondly. He turned, robes sweeping across the canyon dust, moving back toward his waiting ship. I suspect our paths will cross again before this war concludes. The Force does not disturb itself over beings destined for irrelevance. As his ship rose into Ashkara's twin sun sky and vanished into the stars, Elena allowed herself a single, unsteady breath. Captain, Osei said quietly, was that wise? Turning down a Sith Lord? I don't know, Elena admitted. But it was honest. And right now, that's the only compass we have. Dooku's ship had barely vanished from Ashkara's sky before Vrai rounded on Elena, his expression somewhere between disbelief and grudging admiration. You do realize what you just did, don't you? Turned away Count Dooku himself, one of the most powerful men in the galaxy, offering you protection, and you just said no. I said not yet, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Not to men like Dooku, there isn't. Vrai shook his head, but there was something almost like respect in his weathered features. You've got more nerve than sense. Captain Marsh, whether that's going to keep you alive or get you killed, I genuinely couldn't say. The answer came faster than any of them expected. Less than 18 hours after Dooku's departure, Ashkara's outpost registered a new arrival, not the sleek, quiet approach of a separatist agent, but the thundering descent of a Republic gunship, its distinctive silhouette cutting through the twin sun sky with none of Dooku's subtlety. Company. Park called from the makeshift sensor station Rena had cobbled together. Big ship. Republic markings. According to what little our database has cross-referenced from local broadcasts, Elena felt the weight of the moment settle over her shoulders. Word traveled fast in a galaxy stitched together by hyperspace, lanes and desperate war, and apparently a separatist leader's personal visit to an unregistered ship on a lawless moon was exactly the kind of intelligence that reached Republic ears within a day. The gunship's landing ramp descended before the engines had fully powered down, and the figure who emerged was unlike anything Elena had encountered yet, not robed like Dooku, but dressed in simple, practical Jedi attire, a lightsaber hilt visible at her belt, moving with a controlled, watchful grace that reminded Elena less of a soldier and more of a diplomat prepared, if necessary, to become something far more dangerous. Jedi Master Sion Doral. The woman introduced herself, her eyes sweeping across the assembled crew, the wrecked ship in the distance, the tense faces of Vrai's people watching from the outpost's edges. I understand Count Dooku paid you a visit recently. That tends to draw the Council's attention rather quickly. News travels fast, Elena said carefully. When a separatist leader personally investigates an unregistered ship of unknown origin, yes, it does. Doral's gaze settled on Elena with an intensity that felt different from Dooku's calculating study, less predatory, more genuinely curious, though no less penetrating. I sense something unusual about you and your crew. Not dark, precisely. Not aligned with anything I recognize. Simply unshaped. New. To the currents of the Force in a way I've never encountered. We're not Force users, Elena said. We don't have anything like what you're describing, where we come from. And yet the Force responds to you nonetheless. Doral tilted her head, considering. That in itself is worth understanding. May I ask what you told Count Dooku when he made you whatever offer he inevitably made? Elena hesitated, weighing honesty against strategy, and settled, as she had with Dooku, on the truth. I told him I wasn't ready to choose a side in a war I don't understand. I told him the same thing I intend to tell you. Master Doral, with respect, my people don't know enough about your galaxy's conflict to commit to either faction responsibly. Something like approval flickered across the Jedi Master's face, subtle but real. That is a more thoughtful answer than most give me, Captain. Most beings caught between the Republic and the Separatists choose based on fear, or profit, or the nearest convenient ally. Few choose based on genuine uncertainty, honestly admitted. Where we come from, Elena said. We were taught that acting from ignorance causes more harm than admitting you don't yet understand enough to act at all. A wise philosophy, rare, in my experience, particularly among species new to galactic society. Doral studied the wrecked Terra's hope with open curiosity. The Council has authorized me to make you an offer as well, though I suspect it will differ considerably from Dooku's. Not conscription, not immediate allegiance. Simply, sanctuary, if you require it, and the Jedi orders. Assistance in helping you understand the shape of the galaxy you've found yourselves in. No cost attached beyond honesty, and no expectation of loyalty beyond what you choose to give freely. It was, Elena had to admit, a markedly different offer than Dooku's transactional bargain, but her Vulcan-trained instincts, honed through years of careful, patient analysis, still flagged the shape of the exchange underneath the generosity. Every faction in this war, it seemed, wanted something from 6 stranded humans and a broken ship. The Jedi simply wrapped their wanting in gentler language. I appreciate the offer, Elena said, genuinely. But I have to ask, if we accept the Republic's sanctuary, does that make us, in the eyes of the Separatists, a Republic asset? Does accepting protection become, functionally, a choice of sides, whether we intend it as one or not? Doral's expression flickered, not offense, but the honest reckoning of someone confronting an uncomfortable truth. In practice, likely yes. The galaxy rarely permits the neutrality it claims to respect. Then I hope you'll understand, Elena said, if I ask for time to consider, rather than accepting immediately. My people have learned, through hard experience, that decisions made under pressure and incomplete information tend to be decisions we regret. For a long moment, Doral simply studied her, and Elena had the distinct impression of being weighed on some scale she couldn't perceive, some Jedi sense of intention and character that went deeper than words. Very well, Captain Marsh. I will report to the Council that you require time, but I would counsel you not to take too much of it. Dooku's interest alone marks you as a target for Separatist intelligence, whether you choose their side or not. And the longer you remain unaligned and unprotected, the more dangerous your position becomes. Understood, Elena said. And Master Doral, thank you for the offer, and for respecting that I need to understand this galaxy before I commit my people to any part of it. As the Jedi Master's gunship lifted off into Ashkara's darkening sky, Vry let out a long, low whistle. Twice in 2 days, a Sith Lord and a Jedi Master, both wanting a piece of you, and you turned them both away with nothing but polite words and philosophy. He shook his head, something between disbelief and genuine amusement crossing his scarred features. Captain Marsh, I don't know whether you're the smartest person I've met in this war, or the one most likely to get us all killed. Possibly both, Elena admitted, watching the gunship's lights vanish into the darkening sky, and feeling, for the first time since the crash, the true weight of the war closing in around them from every direction at once. The days that followed brought no more high-profile visitors, but the absence of drama didn't mean the absence of danger, only that it had shifted from the visible to the concealed. Elena felt it in the way Vry's people watched the horizon a little too often, in the way Osei's translation matrix picked up fragmented Separatist and Republic chatter alike. Both factions apparently maintaining quiet surveillance on Ashkara's newest, strangest arrivals. We can't stay here indefinitely, Park told her on the 4th morning. Running diagnostics on the terrace, Hope's ruined engine, core with the focused intensity of a man trying to solve an unsolvable problem simply because giving up wasn't an option he'd allow himself. The warp coils are beyond field repair. I might be able to jury-rig something using local tech, if I can get my hands on parts we don't currently have access to. But that means trade. That means contact. That means exposure. How much exposure? Elena asked. Enough that staying invisible stops being an option. Park wiped grease from his hands, his expression grim. Captain, I think we need to accept that neutrality has a shelf life. We can delay choosing a side, but we can't delay needing help forever. It was Alvarez, of all people, who found the alternative, not a third faction exactly, but a path adjacent to the war's binary logic. She'd spent her days since the crash embedded in Vryce Outpost, absorbing everything she could about the galaxy's underlying economy, the networks that moved, beneath the Republic and Separatist conflict, like a river beneath ice. There's a group, she told Elena over a hurried meal in the Outpost's common room. Independent traders, mostly. Some smugglers, but also legitimate merchants. Information brokers. A few Force sensitives who never joined the Jedi Order for one reason or another. They call themselves the Ashkara Concord. Not really an organization. More a loose network of people who've decided the war isn't worth choosing sides in. Vryce connected to them. He didn't mention it because he wasn't sure we'd survive long enough for it to matter. And now he thinks we might. And he thinks the Concord might be interested in trading for what we need, technology, parts, safe passage in exchange for something other than loyalty to a war effort. Alvarez hesitated. The catch is, they don't do anything for free. And some of what they'd want in trade might not sit easy with everyone here. The meeting, when it came, took place in a smuggler's den 3 levels beneath the outpost's visible structure, a warren of tunnels and chambers that spoke of decades of careful excavation, hidden from Republic and Separatist scanners alike. The woman who greeted them called herself Ket Solara, a former Republic logistics officer who'd walked away from the war entirely after watching bureaucratic indifference cost soldiers their lives on a battlefield that never should have mattered. Vry tells me you're the strangers who turned down both a Sith Lord and a Jedi Master, Solara said, studying Elena with open curiosity. That takes either remarkable principle or remarkable stupidity. I haven't decided which yet. We prefer to think of it as caution, Elena said. Caution's a luxury most people in this galaxy can't afford. Solara gestured for them to sit at a worn table cluttered with datapads and star charts. But you're not most people, are you? You're something new. And new things, in my experience, are either opportunities or liabilities, depending entirely on how they're handled. Which are we to you? Undetermined, Solara admitted, with a directness Elena found almost refreshing after the careful political maneuvering of Dooku and Doral. Here's my offer, and it's simpler than what the Sith and the Jedi gave you. The Concord can get you parts, real parts, salvaged and traded across a dozen systems, enough to potentially get your ship functional again, or at least stable enough to serve as a base of operations. In exchange, we want information. Not weapons, not technology to be weaponized. Just information, what you know about hyperspace travel that we don't. Insights into your ship's systems. Anything that might help independent operators, like us, survive without depending on either side of this war. And loyalty? Elena asked. What do you want in terms of allegiance? None, Solara said simply. The Concord doesn't do allegiance. We do mutual benefit, freely entered and freely ended whenever either party decides. It's no longer working. No conscription, no ideology, no demand that you fight anyone's war. Just trade, respect, and the understanding that in a galaxy this dangerous, sometimes the only side worth choosing is your own survival. It was, Elena realized, the first offer since the crash that didn't come wrapped in the language of a larger cause. No Republic idealism. No separatist promise of independence from corruption. No Jedi sanctuary offered with unspoken expectations attached. Just a transaction, honest in its self-interest, and somehow more trustworthy for its lack of pretense. I need to discuss this with my crew, Elena said, but I think we can work with these terms. Good. Solara allowed herself a small, genuine smile. For what it's worth, Captain Marsh, you're smarter than most of the desperate strangers who wash up on Ashkara. Most of them choose a side out of fear within the first week, just to have someone bigger than themselves to hide behind. You've held out 4 days against a Sith Lord and a Jedi Master both. That's not nothing in this galaxy. Later that evening, gathered once more in the outpost's common room. Elena laid out the Concorde's offer to her crew, watching their faces for doubt, hesitation, disagreement. It's not permanent safety, she admitted. It's not the protection Dooku offered or the sanctuary Doral promised. It's just breathing room, a chance to understand this galaxy a little better before the war forces our hand. Completely. Breathing room sounds good, Chen said quietly. I don't think any of us are ready to pick a side in a conflict we barely understand. Agreed, Webb added, though his tone carried its usual wariness. But Captain, eventually, we're going to have to choose something. The Concorde buys us time. It doesn't buy us out of this war forever. I know, Elena said, thinking of Doral's warning, of Dooku's cold prediction that neutrality was a luxury the galaxy rarely permitted for long. But time is exactly what we need right now. And if the Concorde can give us that, even temporarily, I think it's worth the trade. Outside, Ashkara's twin suns began their slow descent toward the horizon, and somewhere beyond the canyon walls, enlistening posts and command ships scattered across a dozen systems. Both the Republic and the Separatists continued watching, waiting, wondering when not, if, the strangers from beyond the stars would finally be forced to choose. The Ashkara Concorde proved as good as Solara's word. Within 3 days, salvaged parts began arriving through the outpost's hidden channels, components scavenged from a dozen different ship classes, none of them a perfect match for the Terra's Hope's primitive warp architecture, but enough raw material for Park to begin the slow, painstaking work of hybridizing human engineering with galactic technology. It's not going to be pretty, Park warned Elena. Surrounded by a chaotic sprawl of cannibalized parts in the ship's ruined engine bay, I'm essentially trying to graft a hyperdrive-adjacent power regulator onto a warp coil architecture that was never designed for this kind of energy throughput. Best case, I get us something that can limp through short-range jumps. Worst case, I get us a very impressive explosion. How long? Weeks, if the Concorde keeps supplying parts. Months, if we hit any serious complications. Park wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease behind. And Captain, I should mention, word spreading. Solara says the Concorde's networks are hearing chatter from multiple systems now. Not just curiosity anymore. Interest. Serious interest from serious people. That evening, the nature of that interest arrived at Ashkara's edge in the form of a heavily modified freighter, not Republic, not Separatist, but bearing markings. Osei's translation matrix identified as belonging to the Pike Syndicate, one of the galaxy's most notorious criminal organizations, infamous for spice trafficking and a willingness to deal with anyone, provided the price was right. This is different, Vrai said grimly, watching the freighters approach from the outpost's overlook. Dooku and the Jedi, at least, operate within some kind of framework, however twisted. The Pikes don't. If they've decided your technology is worth acquiring, they won't ask politely. The Pike representative who disembarked confirmed Vrai's assessment within minutes. A cold, calculating negotiator named Oriental, flanked by armed guards whose weapons were considerably less subtle than anything Elena had encountered since the crash. Captain Marsh, Tal said, dispensing with pleasantries entirely. I represent parties interested in acquiring your ship's technology. I'm prepared to offer substantial payment. More credits than your entire crew could earn in years of honest work in this galaxy. I'd strongly advise you to accept. And if we decline? Tal's smile held no warmth whatsoever. Then we'll simply have to explore less pleasant avenues of acquisition. I prefer not to. Violence is expensive, and the Syndicate values efficiency. But we will do what's necessary if reasonable offers fail. It was, Elena realized, the moment Solara and Doral had both warned her about. The point where careful neutrality collided with someone unwilling to accept not. Yet, as an answer, every instinct honed by Vulcan philosophy screamed caution. Patience, the search for a diplomatic path forward. But some threats, she was beginning to understand, didn't respond to patience at all. I need you to leave, Elena said, keeping her voice level despite her racing pulse. The technology isn't for sale, and it isn't available for other avenues of acquisition either. This conversation is over. Tal's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, recalculating. The way Dooku had though with none of the Sith Lord's grudging respect. That's unfortunate, Captain. Truly. I'll relay your answer to my superiors. I doubt it will be the last conversation we have on this matter. The Pike freighter's departure brought no relief, only a deeper, more pervasive tension that settled over the outpost like Ashkara's perpetual dust. Vry convened what remained of his people, along with Elena's crew and a handful of Concord representatives, in the outpost's largest chamber that night. This changes things, Vry said bluntly. The Pikes don't make idle threats. If they've decided your ship is worth taking by force, they'll be back, and next time, they won't send someone to negotiate. They'll send someone to take what they want and eliminate anyone who gets in the way. Can the Concord help? Elena asked. Some, Solaris said, though her expression was grim. We can offer warning networks, some defensive support, maybe safe passage if things go badly enough that you need to relocate quickly. But the Concord isn't an army, Captain. We're traders and survivors, not soldiers. If the Pikes come in force, we can help you run. We can't necessarily help you win. It was Webb who spoke the question no one else wanted to voice. Captain, at what point does refusing to choose a side become its own kind of choice? We've turned away as Sith Lords, protection and a Jedi, Master's sanctuary because we wanted to understand this war before committing to it. But the Pikes don't care about our neutrality. They just see an opportunity. And if we don't have real protection, that opportunity is going to get us killed. Elena felt the weight of the question settle over her, heavier than anything Dooku or Doral had offered. This was the morally complex choice she'd known was coming. Since the moment they'd crashed, not a clean decision between right and wrong, but a genuine dilemma where every path forward carried real costs. I'm not ready to align with the Republic or the Separatists, Elena said slowly, working through the logic even as she spoke it aloud. Both of them would use us as a resource in a war we didn't choose, regardless of how gently they phrased the offer. But I think, she paused, weighing the thought carefully, I think we may need to reconsider Master Doral's offer, not as an alliance, but as protection, sanctuary, specifically, not conscription into the Republic's war effort, but genuine safety while we finish repairs and figure out our next move. That's a fine distinction, Webb said. Not sure the Pikes will care about the difference. Not sure the Separatists will either. Once word gets out we're under Jedi protection. No, Elena agreed. But it might be the only distinction that keeps us alive long enough to matter. She looked around at her crew, at Vry's people, at Solara and the Concord, representatives who'd extended more genuine kindness than either warring faction had managed. I don't like this choice. I don't think there's a version of it I would like. But I think the alternative, waiting for the Pikes to return with enough force to simply take what they want, is worse. The decision hung in the air, heavy with implication, and Elena understood, with the particular clarity that comes only after a moment of genuine moral weight, that whatever came next would define not just her crew's survival, but the shape of humanity's first true steps into a galaxy far larger and far more dangerous than anyone back home could have imagined. Reaching out to Master Doral proved more complicated than Elena anticipated. The Concord's communication networks, built for discretion rather than speed, took the better part of 2 days to establish contact with Republic channels, and by the time Doral's response arrived, confirming she would return to Ashkara personally to discuss revised terms, the atmosphere at the outpost had shifted into something taut and watchful, every shadow suddenly worth a second glance. You're doing the smart thing, Solara told Elena, though her tone carried an edge of something like regret. I won't pretend otherwise. But I want you to understand what accepting Republic protection means for the Concord. 2. Once you're under Jedi sanctuary, our networks become harder to maintain around you. Separatist sympathizers who trade with us won't want proximity to a Republic-protected asset. Some of our people may need to distance themselves. I understand, Elena said. I'm sorry it costs you. Everything costs somebody in this war, Solaris said. That's the lesson you're learning faster than most. Doral's gunship arrived at midday, and this time the Jedi Master wasn't alone. A young Padawan accompanied her, along with a small detachment of clone troopers whose identical faces and disciplined bearing struck Elena as simultaneously impressive and faintly disturbing. An army built from a single template, trained for obedience above all else. Captain Marsh, Doral greeted her, though her expression carried new gravity. I understand circumstances have changed since we last spoke. The Pike Syndicate made it clear that neutrality wasn't going to be respected. Elena said, I'd like to discuss the sanctuary you offered, not as an alliance, not as conscription into your war effort, but as protection while my crew completes repairs and determines our next steps. That distinction matters to you a great deal, Doral observed, studying her with the same penetrating curiosity as their first meeting. It's the only distinction that lets me look at my crew and tell them we haven't compromised who we are, even while accepting help we genuinely need. Doral considered this for a long moment, then inclined her head. The Council has authorized sanctuary terms, provided you're willing to relocate to a more secure Republic-aligned world. Ashkara's proximity to Separatist supply lines makes it increasingly difficult to protect. I'd recommend a transfer to Coruscant's outer districts, or possibly one of the Republic's more secure outpost worlds, where the Terrace, Hope can be properly secured while your engineer completes his repairs. It was, Elena had to admit, a reasonable offer, more reasonable, in some ways, than she'd expected, but something in the arrangement nagged at her, a Vulcan-trained instinct for asymmetry in negotiations that had served her well since the crash. What does the Republic gain from this arrangement? Elena asked carefully. Beyond the goodwill of having helped stranded travelers? Doral's hesitation was brief, but Elena caught it. The Senate will likely want consultation regarding your technology's principles, insofar as they might benefit Republic engineering efforts. Not appropriation, she added quickly, seeing Elena's expression harden. Consultation, your choice, freely given or withheld, regarding what you're willing to share. That's a considerably softer version of what Dooku wanted, Elena said, wrapped in gentler language. Perhaps, Doral acknowledged, with the same honesty that had made Elena trust her, however cautiously, from their first meeting. But I'd rather be honest about the Senate's interests than pretend they don't exist. I can promise you sanctuary and protection without condition. I cannot promise the Senate won't eventually ask for more than that. And I'd rather you enter this arrangement with clear eyes than false comfort. It was, Elena reflected, exactly the kind of complicated, imperfect choice she'd known was coming. Not villainy, not betrayal. Simply the ordinary compromises of survival in a galaxy too vast and too dangerous to navigate on pure principle alone. The arrangement might have proceeded smoothly from there, had the Pikes not chosen that exact moment to demonstrate precisely how serious their threat had been. The attack came without warning, 3 heavily armed transports dropping from Ashkara's twin-sun sky, weapons already firing before Doral's clone escort could fully mobilize. Elena hit the ground as energy bolts scorched the canyon rock above her, the outpost dissolving into chaos. Vry's people and Concord traders scrambling for cover alongside Republic troopers and her own crew. They're not here to negotiate, Webb shouted, dragging Elena behind a supply crate as blaster fire raked the position they'd occupied moments before. Doral moved through the chaos with terrifying grace, her lightsaber igniting in a blaze of blue light, deflecting incoming fire with a precision that seemed almost supernatural to Elena's unaccustomed eyes. Get your crew to the ship, the Jedi Master called out. I'll hold them here. But it was Park's voice, frantic over the comm, that delivered the true crisis. Captain, they're not targeting us directly. They're going for the Terra's Hope. If they can't have the technology, they're planning to destroy it rather than let anyone else claim it. Elena's blood went cold. Months of work, humanity's entire fragile foothold in this galaxy, reduced to a smoking wreck out of nothing but spite, and buried within that ship. Data and technology that, if destroyed, might strand her crew here permanently, with no path home and no bargaining chip left to secure their survival. We can't let that happen, Elena said, already moving, ignoring Webb's protest. Whatever this costs us, we can't lose that ship. Ahead, through the smoke and chaos of the firefight, she could see a Pike demolition team advancing on the Terra's Hope's exposed hull, explosive charges already in hand. And she understood, with sudden terrible clarity, that the next few minutes would determine not just her crew's survival, But whether humanity's first true venture into the stars ended here, in fire and dust, on a forgotten moon at the edge of a war that was never supposed to be theirs. Elena broke from cover in a dead sprint. Webb close behind her, both of them cutting through, drifting smoke and the chaos of crossfire toward the Terra's Hope's exposed hull. Ahead, the Pike demolition team, 3 figures in reinforced armor, had reached the ship's damaged port nacelle, charges already being armed with the brisk efficiency of professionals who'd done this many times before. Webb left flank. Elena called, dropping behind a chunk of shattered rock as blaster fire chewed through the air where she'd been standing seconds earlier. Her sidearm, a crude projectile weapon by galactic standards, felt suddenly painfully inadequate against opponents wielding energy. Weapons that could slice through durasteel. But inadequate didn't mean useless. Elena had spent years training under instructors who valued resourcefulness over raw firepower, who taught that the smartest fighter in any conflict was the one who understood the terrain better than their opponent. And she understood the Terra's Hope's ruined hull better than any Pike demolition expert ever could. "Park," she shouted into her comm, ducking as another volley scorched past. "The auxiliary power conduit. Can you overload it remotely?" "Captain, that'll blow the entire port section." "That's the idea. Give those charges somewhere else to be when they detonate." A tense pause, then Park's voice, grim but resolved. "Rerouting now. You've got maybe 10 seconds before the conduit destabilizes. Get clear." Elena grabbed Webb's shoulder, hauling him back from the hull as the Pike demolition team, still focused on placing their charges, remained dangerously close to the ship's damaged systems. The auxiliary conduit blew with a concussive shriek of overloaded plasma, a fireball of superheated gas venting from the Terra's Hope's wounded flank, catching the demolition team in a blast of heat and force that scattered them backward, charges falling from stunned hands. It wasn't victory, just breathing room, purchased at the cost of further damage to an already crippled ship. But it was enough. Doral arrived moments later, lightsaber blazing, cutting through the reforming Pike assault, with the terrible grace of a warrior who'd spent decades perfecting exactly this kind of desperate defense. Clone troopers pressed the advantage, and slowly, the tide of the firefight began to turn. It was Oren Tal himself who made the final, fatal miscalculation, emerging from cover with a heavy repeating blaster. Target locked not on Elena or her crew, but on Doral, recognizing correctly that the Jedi Master represented the greatest threat to the Syndicate's operation. Elena saw it a half-second before it happened, Tal's weapon rising. Doral's attention split between 3 separate combat threads, a fatal gap opening in the Jedi's defense. She didn't think. She simply moved, throwing herself into Tal's line of fire, her shoulders slamming into his weapon arm a half-second. Before he could complete his shot, the blast went wide, scorching rock instead of flesh, and Tal's surprised curse was cut short as Doral's lightsaber, redirected by the sudden opening Elena had bought her, ended the confrontation with brutal efficiency. The silence that followed felt deafening after the roar of battle, broken only by the crackle of small fires, the groan of the Terra's Hope's wounded hull, and the ragged breathing of survivors taking stock of what remained. Casualties, Elena managed, her own voice unsteady with adrenaline. 2 of Vrai's people, Webb reported grimly. 1 Concord traitor. No losses among our crew, though it's not for lack of trying on their part. He looked at Elena, something complicated in his expression. "You saved Doral's life." "I did what needed doing," Elena said, though the weight of the decision, instinctive, immediate, made without time for careful Vulcan deliberation, settled over her only now. In the aftermath, Doral approached, her lightsaber deactivated but still gripped tightly, studying Elena with an expression that had shifted into something Elena hadn't seen from any Star Wars. Native yet genuine, unguarded gratitude. You had no training for what you just did, no force sensitivity, no combat instinct honed by years of lightsaber work. And yet you saw the danger before I did, and you acted without hesitation. "I didn't think about it," Elena admitted. "I just acted." That, Captain Marsh, is precisely the kind of instinct the Force responds to, whether you're sensitive to it or not. Doral's gaze swept across the smoking battlefield, the scattered Pike casualties, the wounded being tended by Chun-Li and Republic medics working side by side. The Syndicate's attack failed, but it will not be their last attempt. Word of this battle will spread, and it will change how every faction in this war perceives you and your crew. You are no longer simply strange travelers stranded far from home. You are now a demonstrated variable capable of tipping the scales of galactic conflict. Elena looked toward the Terra's Hope, scorched and battered but still standing, still holding within its damaged hull the fragile promise of a way home, or at minimum, a future not entirely dictated by forces beyond her control. Then I suppose, she said quietly, it's time we decided, deliberately and on our own terms, exactly what kind of variable we intend to be. Behind her, Ashkara's twin suns continued their indifferent arc across the sky, and somewhere beyond the smoke and wreckage, in listening posts and command ships scattered across a war-torn galaxy, the strangers from beyond the stars had just announced, in fire and blood, that they were no longer simply passive observers of a conflict they hadn't chosen. In the days following the battle, Ashkara transformed into something Elena could never have anticipated when the Terra's Hope first crashed into its dust and black rock, a quiet crossroads where Republic, Concord, and the fragile remnant of a human crew negotiated not a treaty, but something rarer in this galaxy, an honest understanding. Master Doral remained for a week, overseeing both the Pike Syndicate's retreat and the delicate process of formalizing what protection actually meant in practice. 4-6 strangers with no force sensitivity and no allegiance to either side of a galactic war. The terms that finally emerged bore little resemblance to what Elena had initially feared, not conscription, not the quiet erosion of independence beneath the weight of Republic bureaucracy, but something closer to what Solara and the Concord had modeled from the start: mutual benefit, freely chosen, without demanding, humanity surrender, the caution that had defined every choice since the crash. The Senate will still want their consultations, Doral admitted, on the morning of her departure, watching Park make final adjustments to the Terra's Hope's hybridized engine core. Some things about bureaucracy remain constant regardless of how honestly I negotiate on your behalf. But I've made it clear, in terms the Council understands, that your cooperation is a gift freely given, not a resource to be extracted. I believe that distinction will hold, at least for as long as I have influence to protect it. That's more than I expected when this began, Elena said. You earn more consideration than most, Doral replied. Few beings turn down a Sith Lord's offer and a Jedi's sanctuary in the same week. Purely out of principle, fewer still throw themselves into a blaster's path for someone they've known only days. The Force remembers such choices, Captain Marsh, even in those it doesn't flow through directly. Vry, for his part, remained on Ashkara, his outpost quietly absorbed into the wider Concord network, his relationship with Elena's crew shifting from wary host to genuine, if complicated, ally. You brought the war to my doorstep, he told her, with the dry humor of a man who'd survived worse and knew it. But you also brought the most interesting 6 months of my life. So I suppose we're even. Solara's parting words carried more weight. The Concord doesn't do goodbyes easily, she said, clasping Elena's arm in a gesture that had become, over the preceding weeks, a mark of genuine respect between them. We do until next time. I suspect, Captain, that our paths will cross again. This galaxy has a way of bringing interesting people back together, whether the war wants it or not. Park's repairs, augmented by weeks of Concord-supplied parts and his own relentless ingenuity, finally yielded results 3 weeks after the battle. Not a fully restored warp drive, capable of the interstellar leaps that had once carried them from Earth, but something more modest and more honest: a stabilized, hybridized propulsion system capable of short, controlled jumps within this galaxy's borders, built from equal parts human engineering and salvaged Republic and Separatist technology neither faction had intended to share. It's not going to get us home, Park told Elena, standing beside the Terra's Hope's repaired hull, its scars visible but no longer crippling. Not without a hell of a lot more work. More resources than we currently have access to. But it'll let us move, explore, choose our own path, rather than waiting for this galaxy to choose one for us. Elena considered the ship, considered the crew who'd followed her from Earth's orbit into a war none of them had asked for, and considered, too, the strange, complicated network of allies and adversaries they'd built in the weeks since the crash. A Sith Lord who respected their refusal, a Jedi Master who'd extended protection without demanding submission, a criminal syndicate that had taught them the cost of appearing weak, and independent traders who'd shown them that neutrality, however difficult, remained a choice worth defending. Then that's what we do, Elena said. We move. We explore. We keep making the same choice we made from the beginning, understanding before allegiance, principle before convenience, even when this galaxy makes that harder than we ever imagined. 6 months after the Terra's Hope first tore through Ashkara's sky, the ship lifted off once more, not toward Earth. Not yet, but toward a wider galaxy that had learned, through fire and negotiation both, that these particular strangers could not be simply claimed, conscripted, or eliminated. They had become something the Republic, the Separatists, and every faction between them would need to reckon with on humanity's own terms. Independent, principled, and unpredictable in a war that thrived on predictable allegiances. Behind them, Ashkara's twin suns burned steady over an outpost transformed, a network of allies strengthened by shared danger, and a Jedi Master's quiet report to a council still uncertain what to make of 6 travelers who'd arrived from nowhere and left having reshaped, in small but lasting ways, the delicate balance of a galaxy at war. Ahead lay uncertainty, new worlds, new dangers, and the ever-present question of whether a way home existed at all, or whether the Terra's Hope and her crew were destined to become something new entirely, not Republic, not Separatist, not bound by any single galaxy's rules, but explorers in the truest sense, forging understanding one difficult, principled choice at a time. The Force, Doral had once told her, did not disturb itself over beings destined for irrelevance. Whatever waited beyond Ashkara's horizon, Elena Marsh intended to make certain that prediction remained true. Against all odds, the Terra's Hope and her crew had proven that a galaxy bound by the Force could still be changed by something arriving from beyond it, not through overwhelming power, but through patience, principle, and the refusal to be claimed by either side of a war that was never truly theirs. Elena Marsh had turned away a Sith Lord's offer, tempered a Jedi Master's sanctuary into something freely chosen rather than owed, and earned the respect of traders and smugglers who trusted little beyond their own survival. Humanity's first true venture into the stars had come decades ahead of schedule, without a Federation banner, without the safety net their Vulcan neighbors had once offered and then, deliberately, withdrawn. What remained was rawer, more uncertain, 6 explorers, navigating a war-torn galaxy on nothing but earned alliances and hard-won caution. But in the shadows of distant systems, Separatist intelligence still hungered for their technology. The Pike Syndicate's grudge remained unsettled, and the Jedi Council watched with cautious curiosity, uncertain what these strangers truly meant for the war's fragile balance. The Terra's Hope had found a fragile peace on Ashkara. Whether that peace would hold, as the galaxy's greater storms gathered on the horizon, only time, and the choices still to come, would tell.